Good morning. How are you? I think about each one of you very often and hope you're doing well. I, like you, am sheltered in, and it's certainly, being orange, a real challenge for me. I think it's a challenge for all of us. So I'm hoping you're doing two things. Number one, first, is self-care, and the second one is other care. So I wanted to send you just a quick tutorial on the last 3 steps of the direct lesson, knowing that you can call me, email, or text me anytime if you have some questions about this. This is our capstone assignment for the direct lesson, because what it does is it takes all of these 7 steps and it puts it together, hopefully in a very, very, very smooth flow. The direct lesson, as I mentioned before, is the first 2 direct lessons that you'll be teaching in your student teaching experience, and was going to be taught. One of the direct lessons that you were going to create was going to be taught at Edgemont, but of course that's not going to happen. So I guess I want to start out with 3 particular words that I want you to think about, and the first word is excellence. All of these videos that you will be doing, and you will be doing 3, one will be this final direct lesson. The next one will be cooperative group, which is going to be a little challenging because group is very different than direct and project-based. So the first word is excellence. Excellence in how you deliver your content, excellence in how you look as you're delivering them. And you can see I have on a Mickey Mouse shirt. You can wear a Mickey Mouse shirt. You can wear a sweatshirt, anything. But I'd like you to sit up and I'd like you to accomplish the second word, which is engagement. I need to see that you're engaged, you're fully present, and that you're engaging children. And that would be through the expression, the animation, the excitement, which is the last E, which shows excitement for teaching. Certainly this is sterile conditions for this, and it's not like being in front of a classroom. But at this time, we're sheltered down, and it's the best that we can do to optimize this experience. I have so enjoyed watching your different sections of your direct lesson, in particular the anticipatory set and the input and modeling. So let me go through this rubric with you now, the last 3 steps of the direct lesson in that handout that I gave you. So now after you have accomplished the input and modeling and have completed the 5 W's, we're moving into checking for understanding. Checking for understanding means that you are checking to make sure that the students have enough information to do the B and D of the objective. Remember, the B and D drives everything, your behavior and your degree. Like list 3 poisonous snakes in your herpetology journal. My entire lesson is directed specifically toward that B and D, so that I don't need to add more content or less content that will accomplish that objective. So now that I've gone through that critical step of input and modeling, the next step is to check to see not how well the students are doing necessarily, but how well I did in accomplishing that to get the information to the students in creative, wonderful ways. So I am checking my ability to see how the students comprehended what I had shown them and had lectured to them. As you know, in class, I put you in PLC teams, and I will say, take 2 minutes, and I want you to discuss what I just said. And then I will walk around, albeit coffee cup in hand. Just a minute. Yes, coffee cup in hand, and I will walk around and I listen. That is my checking for understanding. Coming together in a group, discussing. I am seeing how well I did to be able to articulate your comprehension and application of the behavior and degree. So checking for understanding certainly is an assessment. I am assessing 2 things. Number 1, most importantly, how I did. And number 2, how the students are doing. So I know when to come back and what's called reteach. So checking for understanding, Dr. Madeline Hunter, who I have spoken with you about, used to call it dip sticking. And in dipsticking, if you're checking your oil and you put your hood up in your car, first of all, you got to find where your oil is and don't make sure that it's not the water that you're opening up the cap, or you will be severely burned. So you see that little thing that you pull out Honey, what's that called? Dipstick?
Yep.
Okay, checking with the hub. He said, yeah, the dipstick, and you'll see it's very long. And it will tell you how much oil you have. So if you have like 0 oil, you're like, oh my gosh, I have to get oil now. If you have just enough oil, then you know you're cool to go. Put the dipstick back in. So I'm checking to see the oil light in every student. So if I could take off their head and pull out the dipstick from their head, I'm checking their oil light to see if it's on. And if it's on, that's not good. It means I've not been able to model or input enough information into them, as well as practicing that. So the checking for understanding, I'm dipsticking to see how well they're able to articulate the B and the D. Nothing more, nothing less. The direct lesson is very direct, very simple. And remember, the direct lesson, sadly, is the number one lesson design that teachers are using, when in fact there are a multiplicity of more lesson designs, because our goal in 21st century learning is optimal student engagement, where students be given the slow release of autonomy and where they make life-changing, powerful decisions about the content and how this directly is related to them. On the Native reservation, we call it student sovereignty. So let's go back and talk about checking for understanding. There's many ways to check for understanding. The number one way that teachers check for understanding is through test. And this is a no-no at this point, unless you're not going to grade the test. Let's call it an assessment. If I'm going to assess my students, because checking for understanding is a formative assessment, not a summative, I'm formulating an opinion in my mind about how well they're doing based upon their engagement, their articulation, what I'm hearing from them verbally, what I'm seeing written, to make the decision if they have enough information. So it is a checking for understanding. It is a formative assessment. When teachers give tests at this point right now, they really don't even know how well the students are doing. The sad thing is many teachers will grade that test or that assessment when in fact it's not time yet. Ain't nobody got time for that yet, right? So it's just, Dr. Hunter just calls it checking, dipsticking, to see how well you have done as a teacher and how well the information has been transferred to the students. So again, if I'm just doing a quick little assessment, quick little test, and looking at that, cool deal, that's fine. But to grade it is not appropriate at this point, unless I know every student is going to rock and roll on that. May I say to you something personally with these years in teaching? I think that in many ways it's probably unethical is really a strong word, but it's not good practice, let's say, for a teacher to give a test, count it, record it, and not knowing how well their students are going to do. That's mastery learning. I set the objective, I teach to it, I assess it, and then I applaud my students how well they're doing. Certainly I will have some students who I think have that optimal mastery, and they do not. Then I go back and reteach. So again, take this with you in the field. Other than these state exams that I'm required to give, any teacher-made test, and even a chapter test, I should not be giving those tests unless I know, I'm at that checking for understanding, that I know the students have enough information to operationalize that B and D. Okay, so another way that teachers check for understanding, and this happens to be not on the high effect size scale, is any questions? Anybody have any questions? Well, at college that I'll ask that, and of course, nobody says anything. Not really any different in like high school. Of course, in elementary, they'll raise their hand and you'll call on them and they'll say, oh, I forgot what it is, because they're excited. Now, here's the thing about anybody understand, anybody get it, raise your hand. A couple of students will articulate something to you, and that does not give you a sense of how the entire class is doing. So we as teachers tend to call on students who give us the right answers. We do, because we want to hear that we've done really well. So that is not a good practice either. So Dr. Hunter says that we need to create a mechanism to generate questions to students so that every student has an equal and equitable opportunity to create an answer and respond. So as you will see, let's go through this checking for understanding. Create a checking activity using checking tools in which the students will be in groups answering questions about the content that you've just presented in your input and modeling. Again, as much as we can get students into groups to allow them to consult with each other, we see that academic achievement has a higher proficiency level when students are working in cooperative groups, albeit that the groups sometimes have got to be carefully selected. Many times groups of students will talk and the teachers get freaked out, when in fact most of the time, if you're engaging the students, you have a joyful attitude, you believe in them, they know that you believe and care about them, you have strategies in line for them to self-monitor, self-reflect. More than likely, if they're off task, they're just doing it as a social means and they'll come right back on. So I'm going to put my students in groups. So when you're doing the section that you're doing the narrative, because this is still on with your narrative, you will be talking with the students and creating a mechanism in front of them that will allow to put them in groups. From that, you're going to be going back to your modeling, your input and modeling. You're going to be designing questions, simple response questions that they can answer in their group. So for example, if my students are going to be able to list 3 poisonous snakes in the herpetology journal, in my input and modeling, of course, my vocabulary will be poisonous. It will be snake, okay? It will be the verb list because that's for my standard, right? So my questions will be drawn from my input and modeling, in particular, perhaps in the who, what, when, where, why. How many questions do I want to ask? Probably 5 to 7, maybe more for older, maybe 2 to 3 for younger. So I'm going to be asking them to discuss questions in their group. So I have my students in groups of 3. I've designed a strategy for that. Maybe it's the strategy that they're in their PLC teams. And I'm going to say, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to discuss the characteristics of a poisonous snake versus a non-poisonous snake. When you're done, I would like for you to hold up your flag, put it in your little cup, then I know you're finished. And then I'm going to walk around, I'm going to listen, I'm going to say, okay, tell me characteristics, 3 characteristics of a poisonous snake, and they're going to report out. They're actually practicing in many ways the B&D. The next step, they're doing the B&D, but right here, again, my role as a teacher in this step is to make sure they have enough information that they can articulate and do and engage in that will allow them to execute the B&D, which is guided practice. The checking for understanding is for me. How well did I do? How am I going to know how well I did? Is I'm going to create a set of questions. But before that, number 1, I'm going to put them in groups. And in your dialogue, you're going to tell me through your narrative how you're going to select the groups. Then you're going to go through your input and modeling, and you're going to pluck out questions, pluck, that is aligned to your B&D. I'm not going to ask them in the checking for understanding what are the most important correlates for snakes to survive, because that's not what my B&D is. My B&D is list 3 characteristics of poisonous snakes in your herpetology journal. I am focusing on the B&D. The B&D drives everything. If you're going to go to Disneyland, it's going to be a while. You know exactly where you're going. You're either going to fly there or you're going to get your GPS going. You're not going to use the GPS to go to Texas. So we want to not take the GPSs to Texas when we're going to either Disneyland or Disney World in Florida or California. So let's go over it again. Look at your rubric on checking for understanding. Wait a sec. Now, what I want you to do, a set of checking tools for every individual student. I want you to just blot that out. That was something we were going to do at Edgemont. So under step 5, checking for understanding, under the rubric, it says a set of checking tools for every individual student. Just nix that. The next one is create 4 or 5 questions taken specifically from your input and modeling section. Input's what I say, modeling's what I do. I'm going to get those 4 or 5 questions. Focus in on the questions that are related to them being able to execute the B&D. Okay? And then students placed in groups. That's probably, I would say, a section when you actually instruct that section, that step 5, checking for understanding, probably 5 to 10 minutes, less younger children, maybe 2 to 3 minutes, kindergarten, first grade, okay? Remember, checking for understanding. I'm checking how well I did. Everything comes back to the teacher. The mirror is on us. Our children come to us wonderfully designed. There's nothing wrong with them. Do they have issues? Absolutely. Do they have trauma? Yes, some of them do. But there's nothing wrong with our students. There's nothing wrong with our colleagues. We come with a zealous attitude, our call to teach. Zealous attitude, no judgment, focused. So that's the checking for understanding. Bada boom, bada bing. The next step, step 6, guided practice. Wow, I so remember going whitewater rafting with about 6 gals in West Virginia, okay? And we went on the New River. We received our life jackets, our wetsuits, because it was in the spring, and we had a guide. And I thought, oh, who needs a guide, right? Well, note guided practice. I'm so glad we had a guide. So we're going over and we're paddling and we're paddling. All of a sudden we're going over the waves and the hydraulics that are circling. The guide says, all stop. And we're like, yeah, you want us to stop? Are you kidding me? You want to paddle because you think you're going to die in these rapids. But he's a guide. And we saw a boat next to us. And the gal guide was saying, all rest. And I'm like, okay, it's all good. And we would just go over the waves, very calm and cool. Relax a little bit. Gripping the side, right? Make sure we don't jump out. But the purpose of guided practice, the teacher is guiding. You'll note in the independent practice, the teacher is no longer guiding. These are 2 critical tools. Guided practice. Colleagues, all they are doing is you're presenting them a narrative. You'll go back over to your icon where you have your B&D, and you will say, herpetologist. Now it's time. Come over here, slither over here. Here's the icon of Sam the Snake. I would like for you to list, and I have my hand there, list 3 characteristics of poisonous snakes in your herpetology journal. I'm going to give you 8 minutes to do that. Ready, go. Now my role is not to go sneak down to the teacher's lounge and have coffee. I'm going to have my little coffee pot in the room or my little whatever it is there, right? But I'm not going to be off in the corner. I'm going to be walking around. Now my role is to do this. I don't say anything. I've already taught. Ain't nobody got any time to say anything right now as a teacher. My time is to listen because I'm guiding practice, which means I'm going around and I'm listening and I'm seeing, hey, do they really have it? It sounded like they did in checking for understanding, but now's my time to really check. This is an assessment. Guided practice is a formative assessment. They're doing the B&D. I'm walking around. As you know, I walk around all the time in class, all the time. I put you on assignment. Hey, go online. Look at these 3 types of lesson designs. This group do directed instruction. This group do CURR group. This do project-based. 5 minutes, report out, ready, go. Now, I just don't hang out like, I'm walking around. I'm listening. Then I ask you to report out. This is a doing of the B&D. Very, very, very simple. It's probably the shortest step in all of the 7 steps. Last step, independent practice. Wow. A lot of teachers think this is homework. And I think homework can be important in certain instances. We do know what John Hattie says about homework with high effect size, that it really does not have an effect. And in some instances can have a negative effect, but in some instances can have a positive correlation of above 0.4, which is that tipping point when actual learning takes place. And also, we know that that learning will take place when a parent or guardian or someone that the child cares for and trusts and loves sits with them or is in the same area that they are, and they execute their homework. So this is not necessarily homework, although it can be. The students are practicing the B and D somewhere away from you. Now, it could be in the room, but you're not necessarily there. You are off to the side. For example, if I want my students to locate three resources for their paper on the Civil War, I'm going to be sitting at my desk or doing something, and my students are going to go around the classroom and locate three resources. I'm there, but I'm not fully present working with them. Or another example of independent practice, my students go down to the library. I say you have 20 minutes to locate three resources for your paper on the Civil War, that one-page paper, because they're second graders, right? One page. Now, notice independent means I am not fully present there. Or they can go home, pending they have a Chromebook or they have access, because I have to make sure if I do have students do something online that they have access to it. So if they have access to a Chromebook, I could say when you go home, I would like for you to seek out on your Chromebook three resources for your paper, one-page paper on the Civil War. When you find them, I'd like for you to download those and email those to me, or put that on our classroom Facebook. So independent practice means that I'm not really fully present. So coming back to the whitewater rafting thing, the next day, the river was up so high that we actually found out that we probably shouldn't have been on the river because it was so high. Well, there is a river called the Gully River that is very, 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 really challenging for experienced kayakers. You really don't usually see a guide with a kayaker because there's one seat. Let me tell you, I am so happy we had a guide. But I will tell you now that I kayak a lot and I feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable going over anything other than at Kensington, maybe a little bit of waves, but it's because I had a guide to get me through some of the waves early on that I was able to do it myself. So independent practice means I'm not fully present, they are on their own. Let me give you one caution, what I see all the time in classrooms. Teachers will set an objective. They will teach to it in the input and modeling. But when it comes to checking for understanding, guided practice, and independent practice, they have them doing something tremendously different. For example, set the objective. My students will list 3 poisonous snakes in their herpetology journal. Teach to it who, what, when, where, why. I think I have all the W's, right? Checking for understanding, herpetologist. Now it's time to list 3 characteristics of poisonous snakes in your herpetology journal. Guided practice. I'm extracting questions from my input and modeling, putting them in groups, walking around, listening, not interacting, listening. And independent practice, going to the Chromebook at home, listing 3 characteristics of poisonous snakes, and then uploading them on the class Facebook. Here's what I've seen happen over and over again. Teachers will begin, list 3 poisonous snakes in your herpetology journal. And as the lesson goes on, the guided practice and independent practice becomes, pretend like you're a park ranger and design a snake habitat for a poisonous snake to live in. So I think that's one of the reasons why we have standards. And I do like the standards. I think it does focus us. I do have some issues with standards, but that's all right. That's just my own issues, right? But it does help us to be fluid across states. So you set the objective, the B and D. You teach to the objective, the same B and D in the input and modeling. You assess the same objective, the same B and D. You check for understanding, the same B and D. And in the input and modeling, the same B and D. So what I'm going to be listening for, heads up on this, heads up, throughout the entirety of your narrative, I'm going to be holding hostage the B and D in your objective. I'm going to listen for it. I need to hear it from the time you do your part step 2, which objective, all the way through independent practice. I hope this has helped. I'm available. I'm not going anywhere, right? I'm just hanging out with my hubby and my kitty. And our 2 sons happen to be living with us too, because they have an apartment in Detroit, and the rate of the virus there is astronomical. So if any of you live in Detroit, please, please, please be extra, extra careful. You know, I care about you guys, and I know it's a rough time. And I've been really excited that Granny is sending us videos, and I hope you've enjoyed them. If you're a mom or dad in the house and you're listening to this, or your extended family, thank you so much for the wonderful student that you have blessed me with this semester. They are fantastic. I happen to have 4 sons myself, 3 grandchildren, and I know the blessing of family. Take care, guys. Bye for now. And how you doing?